Hello, Daniel.
Hi,
Daniel
Joe.
Schweimler. How are you?
I'm well. And you? I'm not so sure about the state of the country. What's been happening?
It's been a tough time. Decrees by the government. They love making decrees. They don't like making laws. Really do like decrees. And there were a couple of them that were a bit mind-boggling. One was labor. Maybe you can go into that. What happened with the new law that really goes against people going on strike here, which is incredible for a country like Argentina.
Where strikes are regular. I mean, we're always having transport strikes. That's one of the most common ones. But this is essential industries. But it's not clear what Milei means by essential industries. You guessed police, fire, ambulance service. But I think he's widened the scope. I mean, it's not even clear whether this decree is legal, that fits the terms of the Argentine constitution. That we don't know yet.
One of the things that this decree does say is that essential services include 24-hour businesses, 24-hour-a-day businesses, which, will include kiosks, which are open all day. Well, their workers are also prohibited to strike.
And this is just the latest, isn't it? A few days ago we had another one which has kind of seemed to be an anti-immigrant decree in a country which generally welcomes immigrants, 46 million people in the 8th largest country in the world. Some would argue there's room for everybody. And a lot of Argentines are leaving because of the economic and social difficulties. They leave for Italy, Spain, the US on a constant basis. So you would think there's room for people. Yet he's tapped into this mood of anti-immigration. Again, it's not clear exactly what he means. He's thrown it out there, and I think he's waiting to see what the response will be like.
It's not really an issue. Even in the neighboring countries, notably poor countries like Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, there have been immigrants at times, but a lot of them are returning. The situation here in Argentina is much worse than the situation, for example, in Bolivia. Economically, Bolivia is doing just wonderfully compared to Argentina. Milei can talk about all he wants about what's going on here, but the situation for people, the daily wage, the wages here don't support the daily spending of people, and they're running across the border. People are going back. I have one friend who had a Peruvian person cleaning the house. She left. She went back to Peru.
Right. What do you think he's playing at, though? He throws out these decrees. They're very controversial. They attract a lot of attention, quite often a lot of anger, and then sometimes just kind of fade away. Then they can't be implemented or they're too difficult to implement. But I think he just throws them out there quite often to see what the response will be like, to see if people take to the streets, if he can get away with it. It's an odd way of governing, maybe, but it seems to be quite successful in terms of its popularity.
But isn't that where we're going with this lovely podcast today? It's comparing Milei and Trump.
I was going to ask you, how are there similarities? Who's copying who? Who's copying who? Is Trump copying Milei, or is Milei copying Trump?
Generally, it's Milei copying Trump, but every now and then you have a chainsaw where Trump or Elon Musk used that chainsaw, which was originally an idea patented by Mr. Milei. So you have a bit of a mixture there, I would say. It's interesting because people who have been watching Trump through Trump 1.0, as they say, to 2.0, they point to the fact that oftentimes he has decrees or pronouncements that almost hide other things that are going on. And I think Milei has taken that form also to his government. So, for example, these two, the immigrant and the labor reform stuff, have come out, and he's pushed this stuff, especially that, Argentines can't go on strike. My goodness, it's like Argentines can't play football. He's pushing this and kind of hiding, according to some media people here, other things that he's doing. For example, he dissolved the unit that was investigating the controversial crypto Libra, it's called the Libra, that he spouted in one of his X screams for people to buy, and a lot of people ended up being victims of fraud in that case, and we understand that Milei is being investigated. It should be pointed out that it's quite similar to what Mr. Trump is doing with a $2.3 billion amount of money that has come in for crypto or meme coins or whatever you want to call them that have come in since he's taken office.
It's one of their similarities, I think, isn't it? A disrespect for the law, especially when the law or the country's constitution gets in the way, is seen as an impediment to them implementing what they want to implement, whether it's High Court judges, Supreme Court judges, the constitution, a kind of disrespect and impatience with these things that get in their way. And Milei certainly seems to have that, Trump definitely, and they will both criticise judges as being anti-patriotic or lefty, communist, whatever. So,
absolutely.
I mean, the fact that Milei was criticising Argentina's recently deceased Pope, on stage, calling him an arch-communist and a nasty piece of. He backtracked on that when the Pope died, but again, will criticise anybody and everything to shake things up. And they have a similar support base, I would argue, that conservative, right-wing, a lot of young men, who seem to like their despicable attitude to women, which Trump has and Milei certainly has. They seem to attract this kind of, incel-loving young men. I mean, my wife's got many nephews and nieces. Nearly all the nephews, we know, slightly embarrassingly, voted for Milei, split the family. This was a kind of left-leaning family, and these young men whose parents had very often voted for the left, for the Peronists in the past, have now turned to the far right because they saw some kind of future, still see some kind of future in a Milei government, as I'm sure many in the US see with Trump.
I do have relatives who not only voted but scream about Trump. It's not a very nice thing. But anyway, to do with the Pope, I can say this, that both Milei and Trump have used image of the Pope. Milei put out on his Twitter account the Pope dressed as a lion. A lion is the image that he has of himself, and he talks about going back in one of his past lives to the Roman times when he was a lion. In one of his crazy.
It would be comical if it weren't so tragic, wouldn't it? They would be
yeah.
hilarious. I mean, we've given up satirizing them. So, I mean, what they both are is narcissists. They both seem to have trouble.
Trump used the image of himself dressed as the Pope, right. which is just incredible.
They both seem to have trouble identifying with human beings. Milei, I know, is very good with figures. He's an economist. I mean, he came to prominence, didn't he, as a talk show host on these late night kind of shouting matches you have on Argentine television. The eccentric, the maverick economist with his chainsaw. And he was ridiculed in the early days, as Trump might have been when he was doing, his TV programs.
Absolutely.
And then gradually they seem to seep into the public consciousness as I don't know, an alternative to mainstream politics, which people are fed up with. I mean, Argentina, we've had you've been here quite a few years, as have I. We've seen economic collapse after economic disaster from both left and right-wing governments. And I think people kind of came to Milei thinking, we need something else. Anything will do. Everything else has failed. He's the man. But the thing is, if your car is broken and one mechanic after another can't fix it, you don't go and get a bricklayer to fix your car. Because everything else failed. You get a better mechanic, And I think Milei is very much that. He's the alternative, although he's not the alternative politician. He doesn't have the answers. Yet plenty of people think that he does because he's different.
The idea that the Argentines have in their head is that Argentina is in a constant economic morass. And they have reason to believe that. We certainly can say that. What they don't see is that other countries have their own problems, their own situations. For example, if there's a mass shooting, which in the U.S. is probably every day, the Argentines will come and they'll say to me, how do you accept that? In the same way that people in the U.S. will say, how do you accept the fact that you have more inflation per day than we have per year? How do you accept that in Argentina? I think, something needs to be done, and hopefully it will be done. But, Argentina is in constant economic crisis. And that's just the way it is.
And people do get tired of that and they leave. Argentina loses a lot of its brightest and best simply because they get impatient with hearing living through failed economic and social policies and going to live in the US, Spain, Italy, where even though they might not be earning as much, they've got a stability they don't have here.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to plenty of Argentines who come back to visit who say, I'm probably economically better off in Argentina, but it's so tiring, constantly fighting, constantly looking at the inflation rate, never knowing with any certainty whether you'll get paid the same, your money at the end of the month will be worth the same as it was last month.
I agree with that, although I know Argentinians in California and New York who will say to me they can't deal with a number of the issues. They're talking about inflation in the United States.
Right.
So I guess they feel like their country has come back to haunt them in some ways with inflation in the US.
Well, in the UK, I think the latest inflation figures came out yesterday or today, 3.5% annually. I mean, if you've got 3.5% monthly in Argentina, we're kind of doing okay. But I mean, we're in the process of selling our house and buying another one. We will be in that ridiculous situation where we'll be walking through the streets with supermarket plastic bags full of US dollars.
Yeah.
Because you've got to have US dollars in this country as this kind of bulwark against inflation to buy anything big like a house or a car. We all know that. We've all done it. It shouldn't be. We should be using Argentine pesos, but nobody will sell a house unless you're...
Or a bank check.
Yeah.
Which they will not issue in dollars.
Yeah, and they have to be pristine dollars with the cara grande, the big head of Abraham Lincoln on the note, or they won't accept it, or they'll accept it at a lesser exchange rate.
Absolutely,
and it's a slightly ludicrous situation. Again, we've all changed on the black market. I mean, we shouldn't be saying it publicly, but we have been because everybody does. Ministers, finance ministers, what was her name? Micheli, was it, some years ago? Michetti, yeah, was caught with thousands of dollars of banknotes in the cistern of an office toilet,
Yeah.
So it's, again, a slightly surreal situation. But that's the reality of Argentine daily life. And Milei, I think, was chosen because he said he would, with his famous chainsaw, he would chop all this away. He would get rid of the dead wood. He would fight, he would get rid of the bureaucracy. He would fight against bureaucracy. And he's come in, somehow fulfilling some of that promise. He has chopped back government departments. He's lost jobs on a massive scale, spends nothing on the state, as little as he can, including human rights.
Yeah.
It's taken a real battering.
A terrible battering. We've both been to the ex-ESMA in recent times, and it was really a very special place, a torture center. Approximately 5,000 people who went in never came out, and it's been turned in the last about 15 years. It's been a center for human rights activity. Well, it's been decimated by this government. Part of the chainsaw that we see that now Elon Musk is using in the U.S. is taking real jobs, taking science to task also. The amount of scientists, we're talking about a country that Argentina has a tremendous scientific community respected around the world.
Several Nobel Prize winners, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And within Latin America, probably the finest universities here, and things have been once again decimated by groups of people who are anti-science. They're people who don't believe in climate change.
Anti-expert, aren't they, in many ways, including obviously scientists fall into that
Absolutely,
category.
yeah.
So very little investment in the science, the science community here. So you were telling me earlier about scientists who were being brought back to Argentina, being enticed to come back and work. I remember under the Kirchner government, Christina Kirchner especially, investing a huge sum of money in science labs, and again trying to
building
bring
a
these,
whole center of
yeah.
science in Palermo, and building a new building where scientists could work in the education center. Really tremendous changes, and those have been just, now scientists are leaving the country in droves. And I can talk to my father-in-law, who's a well-known physicist who brought people, helped in the group Raíces, or Roots, that brought people back, scientists back here, top scientists. I remember there was one of the top physicists in the world from Princeton who came back to teach here. And it was a very successful program. Well, my God, those people are now making salaries that you might as well be begging on the street with that salary.
Right. And it's part of a common ideology, isn't it? We've seen it with Trump. We saw it with Jair Bolsonaro, the former president in Brazil. Certainly with Milei. You've got to look at the friends, the people they mix with. I mean, we know that Milei is a great friend of Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, the one who's built this huge, great prison in San Salvador, certainly to San Salvador, taking in the migrants that the United States is throwing out. It doesn't seem to conform to any kind of international law. They haven't been tried, many of them. Some of them aren't even illegal immigrants. They've just ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's anti-humanitarian in so many ways. Yet those are the kind of people who are mixing together, exchanging ideas. We know Milei has
the
met
human
with
rights
Bukele
situation.
Yeah.
Milei, Bolsonaro, Trump. Look at their stands against gay rights, for example.
Yeah.
Against women's rights. They're all in line in not accepting those anti-woke positions, which are, I call it anti-woke is a joke positions. They're against any kind of really positive changes that have been made over the years in the way of gay rights and women's rights.
Which we've seen here in Argentina to a huge degree. I mean, accepting
Absolutely.
people's chosen gender identity. That happened, I think, 2012 maybe. I remember going to the celebrations outside the Congress where people were being told you can adopt the gender that you want on your official ID, which was a huge relief for so many people who had changed their identity. So that was absolutely massive. Same-sex marriage, first country in Latin America to accept
One
that.
of the first in the world.
One of the first in the world,
yeah.
And Argentina, or Buenos Aires, has become a very gay-friendly city in so many ways until the arrival of Milei. Yeah, so
even Macri, right-winger, conservative, whatever, he did nothing really negative to the, nothing like what we're seeing today with Milei, who openly attacks gay citizens here.
And giving people confidence, the homophobes confidence to go out onto the streets. And when we had an incident shortly after Milei came into office in December 2023, where a house was set on fire, deliberately set on fire, I think in La Boca neighborhood, and 3 lesbians living in that house died. The guy was arrested, but he was spouting homophobic abuse as he was setting fire to the house. It created the conditions in which people like that could get away with it and to some extent be cheered on by some of their supporters. I mean, caused revulsion around in much of Argentina, but things have changed, the mood has changed, and talking to people from the LGBTQ community, they will say that, they're much more frightened, less assertive, keep your head down, try not to make
Absolutely.
so the mood has changed, certainly, and they've created those conditions.
Bolsonaro also while he was campaigning, actually, he was asked about his views on homosexuality, and he said, if I found out that my son was a homosexual, I'd hope he'd die in a car accident.
Wow.
So we're talking about that kind of deep-seated hatred. And there are all kinds of rumors about Javier Milei, who's not married, talking about him being in the closet, whatever. I don't give that much credence, and I'm not going to play with that one. But he is somebody who, the way he attacks the gay community, one wonders if there's something behind it.
Again, like Trump, he seems to revel in controversy, saying something ridiculous and waiting to see what the response will be, and very often gets away with it, finds, to his surprise perhaps, that there's plenty of people out there who support him, and agree with what he's saying. So, and then obviously he builds on that. So I remember 3 years or so ago when Milei was in the bidding to become president. Again, like Trump in the early days, and Bolsonaro as well, wasn't given the hope in hell of getting anywhere close to the presidency. Minor character with 4%, 3%, 7% standings in the opinion polls, going nowhere. And then this surge. I think people are almost embarrassed to admit they would support people like that. And then as the wave grew, got more confidence to say, I am going to support this guy.
And he was a guy who, during the campaign, he talked about the pedophiles. He accused everybody of being a pedophile, who would take your kid into the kindergarten and slap them with oil, and disgusting things he would say.
Yeah.
And he got away with it. That was the most amazing thing. He got away with saying these really oddball things. And one thing about when he says things, to get into, like in his campaign, I remember one thing he said was, we're not going to deal with China. Remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, we're not going to deal with China because we don't trade with communists.
Yeah.
Boy, once he got into, China's the number one trading partner of Argentina.
Yeah.
So he gets into power.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's forget about that one.
Yeah. Well, I suspect that the soya farmers, who most of their market is China, even though they quite likely voted for Milei, then had to kind of sneak along to his office afterwards and say, look, Javier, these are don't forget these are our number one trading partners. I know what you said, we don't like dealing with communists. They would have told Milei, we need to keep doing trade with these people, and that's the reality. I do wonder whether there is a shared ideology. Trump, Milei, Bolsonaro, Milei. I mean, do they compare notes? Do they have meetings? Do they have the same? I mean, Steve Bannon was known to have visited Bolsonaro. He's been to Argentina, Trump's former advisor. So there is a common ideology there.
He was also involved with people who were fighting against the pandemic isolationism, as they called it. With the Patricia Bullriches, he had contacts with them. I just think it's very interesting because what they have in common is they hate these international multilateral organizations until they need them.
Right. Well, although both Argentina were one of the first to pull out of the World Health Organization recently, weren't they? So, as on the back of the whole pandemic situation, a lot of his libertarian, anti-expert support grew, as did Trump's, during the pandemic. Bolsonaro as well. He was
absolutely. They hate the United Nations.
Yeah.
They profess a hatred for organizations like the IMF, for example. But it's well known that Trump has utilized that position and Argentina has certainly utilized that position to get, 80 billion in loans in the last few years, pushed through with Trump's help, of course.
I mean, no sensible lending organization would lend to Argentina. It's the country with the world's largest debt to the IMF, which has also defaulted more times than any other country. They're not good people to lend to. Yeah, as you say, the IMF did give that recent loan, almost certainly with support prodding from the US.
Yes, and the question that we have asked at ABC is, since Trump is totally transactional, what did Argentina have to give him? Did they buy some of those meme coins or Trump crypto coins to get his good graces? We don't know. What we do know is that the IMF today, 48% of their debt internationally is in Argentina. 48%. There aren't 2 countries in the world that are indebted. There are 180 countries in the world that have some kind of dealings with the IMF, of which probably half of them have some kind of debt. But Argentina, 48% of that debt at this point.
Right.
And they still, as of a month ago, got a new extension of $20 billion.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Yeah. Are you seeing any evidence of this 20 billion floating around on the streets?
No.
No, I'm certainly not.
Absolutely
the price,
not.
and that's the one big difference that the US and Argentina have. Whereas Trump is slapping tariffs on anybody and everybody, Argentina, as part of the conditions of getting this IMF loan, are trying to lift tariffs. Milei wants to lift tariffs.
Yes.
Things here are ludicrously expensive, and we were talking the other day about electronics. My phone, the laptop we're using now, were not bought in Argentina simply because it couldn't afford to buy them here. They would be 3 times more, 4 times more the cost in any other country. So the phone's bought in Spain, a laptop in the UK, and anybody that's travelling, I mean, you're going to New York next week, you will go with a long list of things that people like, Joe, you couldn't get me this while you're there, could you? Joe, can you buy me that while you're there?
And I will certainly go to B&H. B&H, if you're hearing this, this is an ad for you guys. So give me a break on the deal. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's one of the realities here. Things are crazily expensive, partly because of the tariffs that are, put onto foreign goods coming into Argentina. I mean, how these electronic shops exist, I never see anybody buying in there. I mean, who buys in these places? Who can afford to? And who's crazy enough to pay 4 times more for a phone, laptop, anything, than you would get in another country?
Well, one of the things that also happened this week is Mr. Milei came out he was talking gloriously about people who avoid paying taxes.
Yeah. Have you ever heard a politician do that before?
Well, I think, Mr. Trump has actually ripped apart the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, which is a similar kind of thing. I think they both have this feeling that paying taxes is robbery in some respect.
Or you're an idiot if you pay. If you can get away with it.
That's right.
These are businessmen, believe in the survival of the fittest, law of the economic jungle. So if you don't need to pay tax, why would you? Yet they're now running their respective countries, which the fundamental rule of any country is you need people's taxes to fund the country.
Absolutely.
So it just doesn't. It makes no sense for left wing, right or right wing. It makes no sense to say, hey, if you can get away without paying, why pay?
And they've never gone after the value-added taxes here. None of, Cavallo, none of these economic libertarians have ever gone after what is a 21% value-added tax. It's a totally regressive tax that goes against the poor here because they're paying the same for that bottle of milk that the rich do. 21% is a huge amount. I don't know what it's like in London, but in New York, I think it's 8%.
Yeah. So we've totally eviscerated Javier Milei, president of Argentina, yet, I hate to say it, but we have to say it, there were city elections last week, Buenos Aires city elections, in which his party did very well, and we've got midterm elections coming up at the end of October, where he's likely to do very well. If he's that bad, why do Argentines keep voting for him?
I think similar to Trump, you have to ask yourself, why do people who are the most harmed by those policies vote for these leaders like Bolsonaro? I mean, I remember being in Sao Paulo when Bolsonaro was running his campaign, and I met some people from the gay community who were going to vote for Bolsonaro. That's obviously a worst case scenario or whatever. But we're talking economically. A lot of poor people in Argentina are voting for Javier Milei. A lot of poor young people. And they're the ones who are most affected by the policies he promotes, which give no support from the government for any programs to lift these people out of poverty.
I mean, some of the worst cases we've seen, we've been there ourselves on the regular Wednesday afternoon protest where pensioners will protest outside the Congress. And we've been there in the past when the police have been firing tear gas, have been whacking pensioners on the head with batons, there have been injuries, and they've also turned against some of the journalists who have been out there covering these stories. If you can't suppress the stories, suppress the messengers of what they've been doing.
Absolutely.
I mean, one photographer the week we were out there choking on tear gas was Pablo Grillo, a photographer here who was crouching down to film and got a tear gas cartridge in his head. and was lucky to be alive. He's still quite badly injured, but he's lucky to be alive. So,
Yeah.
and others have been arrested at the most recent demonstration. Others
Just
were arrested.
yesterday, a couple of foreign journalists, actually, they're Argentine working for foreign media. They were attacked and they were arrested and injured. They have been released today, I understand. It's, I don't understand that idea of people voting against their own interests, but it's something that happens quite a bit.
Again, like in the US, it could be argued that the opposition, in this case the Peronist Party here, very much like the Democrats in the US, it was a bad defeat at the last presidential elections. They haven't really recovered from it. They're split many different ways. They don't know how to move forward. And they're presenting no viable alternative to what at the moment, government, a presidency built on promises. They haven't failed yet. He keeps saying we need to wait, we need to wait, we need to wait. People are still waiting. They're still being patient. I guess until those policies are seen not to work, if indeed they don't, as I suspect they won't, people will keep supporting. Hope.
They've never worked before, so I don't think they'll work now.
I don't think so. No.
But the other thing is, at least go and don't vote. And that's something that happened this time. The amount of people Argentina has. You have to vote, technically. We can talk about that there's no real punishment, but it is an obligatory vote. 53% of the people voted in the city elections. Perfectly sunny day, wonderful day for large turnout. 53% in a country where 70 to 85% of the people vote in every election. So this was a huge, I think it was 20% lower than the last similar midterm elections 4 years ago.
Which implies, obviously, people feel they didn't have a viable choice.
Exactly.
And they're losing hope, lost hope with what's on offer. And losing interest in politics in general, I guess. But it is a country which values its democracy. I mean, it got democracy back after a brutal dictatorship in 1983. There are plenty of people here who remember those dark days and very much value their democracy. And one of the ways of ensuring that democracy continues is turn up at the ballot box. And if you're not, it implies perhaps a loss of value in democracy. I don't know. It's a serious issue here when people don't vote, which is why it was made obligatory, and now people seem to be defying that.
There was a movement about, right after 2001, there was the 500-kilometer movement where people would go and find ways to party 500 kilometers from their, usually we're talking about Buenos Aires area, they would go out because if they could prove that they were that far away, they were no longer having that obligation to vote.
Yeah.
They were outside the area of supposedly being able to come in and vote.
Yeah, I mean, we were in London for several Argentine elections, and my wife, who's an Argentine citizen, would go to the Argentine embassy to register as somebody who was more than 500 kilometers away from Buenos Aires and could be excused voting. But she would make a point of going to the embassy to say, I would have done if I could, but here I am.
Another thing about the attacks of both Milei and Trump that are similar, Trump has attacked Taylor Swift constantly, is now attacking Bruce Springsteen. Milei attacked Lali Esposito, a famous singer in Argentina, in the same kind of way, because she didn't, go out and support him and attacking her. And there was also a misogynist element to his attacks on her. There's also the military parades. Both Milei had a military parade, and Mr. Trump is supposedly spending $90 million on his own military parade. They're consumed with this whole idea of statues. The Osvaldo Bayer statue, which a Milei person decided to take down in Patagonia. Osvaldo Bayer was a wonderful historian and writer who wrote about the rebellions in Patagonia. And the Milei government has no sense of the struggles of the indigenous populations here.
Which again is similar to Bolsonaro, a great, disparage
Absolutely.
the whole indigenous culture, and basically because they saw them as an impediment to development of the Amazon especially, but anywhere where indigenous people were expressing their rights, if it got in the way of profit, and I suspect Milei has a very similar.
Similar in the way of mining and oil and gas production, many times that's found, and lithium also. These deposits are found on indigenous lands, not to mention the ecological interest
Yeah.
of a place like one of the major lithium areas in the northwest of the country is a place where flamingos go. That's their habitat to lay eggs. Do they lay eggs? I'm
I
trying
think
to
they do. I
think.
think they do. Yeah.
So just if you're Milei and you are trying to get lithium companies to come, corporations to come down here, including your friend Elon Musk, and those lithium deposits are in ecologically sensitive areas and indigenous lands that are considered sacred. Well, what do you think you're going to do?
And similar in the US.
Who's going to win?
If there's drilling to be done on the reservation, that pipelines to be laid, they
Absolutely.
will be laid. So that's one other maybe slight difference between Milei and Trump. Milei is not nearly as nationalistic, is he? He doesn't. He's talked about getting rid of the Argentine peso and replacing it with the US dollar. So you'd have a picture of Abraham Lincoln on Argentine used banknotes. He's not nearly as nationalistic about the Malvinas, Falkland Islands, and the long-running conflict with the UK over ownership of those islands.
Boy, he is not.
He's not. I mean, again, it's about profit. There might be oil to be had out there, out in those South
Right,
Atlantic
let's work a
waters.
deal.
So that's a deal. Yeah, that's far more important in his mind, it seems, than getting the islands back, which is what most Argentines probably would like to see.
Absolutely.
So that's, I think, their big one of the big
At least
differences.
Trump, I wonder about his nationalism because I think he's more egotistical than anything else and transactional. And I think more than anything, he puts up that veneer of nationalism, which Milei doesn't even put up.
No.
It's just not there. Even when he's had the military parades, they aren't so much military. I compare them. They're like an Argentine version of North Korea a little bit.
That's an interesting one.
A few years ago, Menem did one of these, and he had a parade going down Libertador, the big avenue here, and most of the floats going by were like military vehicles with some vegetable on them. So you had a huge carrot atop a tank. And that was his parade that he paraded out. As I say, it's like a bad imitation of Pyongyang.
So where are we going to go? What do you think is going to happen? Midterms in October. Milei's popularity, is it going to? When does it start to wane? Does it start to wane? Does it start to fade?
He's got 20 billion. I think Trump will wane much quicker than Milei, because I think people had very unreal expectations, really of both of them, but more so that Trump gave the expectations. Well, he said, in the first day it'll change. With my policies, everything will change. Inflation will go down the first day. That's just not going to happen. With his whole tariff insanity, it's probably going to go up. So I think he will have a hard time. Milei, 20 billion may not sound like much, but for an economy like Argentina's, it's a tremendous boost. This country was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he got that loan, and I believe he probably got some other loans as part of that with the World Bank, and the Treasury Secretary of the U.S. came down here. He didn't come down here to say hello and go goodbye. Something was going on there too, so they're getting infusions of money because they don't want the opposition in here. They want Milei to be here, and I think they probably will be successful in October. What do you think?
Okay, well, I suspect in October, yes, that 20 billion will keep the country afloat until then. So much depends on obviously how they spend that money, how that money's used, and whether the investment, they're always talking about investment coming into Argentina. It's just whether the deep-rooted problems that Argentina has are too deep-rooted to, for people to overcome those problems, the incentives to come to Argentina. I don't see people investing massively here. There's too much with corruption, with bureaucracy, with vested interests. Deciding what goes on here. We'll see.
Well, I'm going to ask a British magnate like yourself. Would you invest in Argentina?
Absolutely not. No, it's a wonderful country. I love living here, despite its many faults. But investing in a country like this, I don't see what your returns would be. A lot of bureaucracy, having to deal with corruption, it would be very difficult. It takes a brave person to invest their own money in Argentina.
Yeah, I think there are people who are investing in the financial markets looking for a quick buck.
Yeah.
And that is something, but I would not, as a U.S. magnate that I am, I would not do that because the risk is just too high for somebody who does not understand those markets at all. But I can understand that there are people who are making loads of money off of this system, the carry trade, as they call it.
Yeah. So we'll wait and see where Milei wields his chainsaw next, and how we watch and wait.
God, there's so many better uses for chainsaws.